Elena scrubbed the stone floor of the orphanage kitchen until her knees ached and her fingers turned raw. At 22, she was too old to remain here, but Mother Superior had allowed her to stay in exchange for endless hours of labor. The other girls her age had long since been married off or sent to work in the textile factories downtown. Elena had neither family nor dowry, which made her prospects dismal at best. "Elena!" Mother Superior's sharp voice cut through the quiet morning. "Come to my office immediately." Her heart sank. That tone never preceded good news. Elena dried her reddened hands on her apron and hurried through the narrow corridors, past the dormitory where younger girls still slept. Mother Superior's office smelled of old books and lemon oil. Behind the heavy desk sat a thin, severe woman who had run the orphanage for 3 decades with an iron fist wrapped in piety. "You have been chosen for marriage," Mother Superior announced without preamble. "A man named Thomas has agreed to take you as his wife. He works as a stable hand and has a small room above the stables at the Westmore estate. It is far more than someone in your position could hope for." Elena's mouth went dry. She had dreamed of marriage, yes, but not like this. Not arranged by the orphanage as if she were surplus goods to be dispensed with. I don't know him," she managed to whisper. "You will meet him on your wedding day, which is set for this Saturday. 3 days from now." Mother Superior's expression softened slightly. "Child, be grateful. You have no family, no inheritance, and no skills beyond cleaning. This man is offering you a roof over your head, and his name. Many would consider it a blessing." Elena nodded numbly, knowing protest was futile. She had learned long ago that orphans had no say in their own destinies. As she returned to her work, she wondered what kind of man this Thomas was. Would he be cruel? Kind? Old? She had 3 days to prepare for a life tied to a complete stranger, and the uncertainty terrified her more than she dared admit. That night, she lay in her narrow bed and prayed that God would grant her the strength to face whatever came next, and perhaps, if it wasn't too much to ask, a husband with a gentle heart. Saturday arrived with gray skies and cold wind that rattled the chapel windows. Elena stood before a cracked mirror in the orphanage's storage room, adjusting the simple white dress that Mother Superior had procured from donations. It was too large in the shoulders and too short at the hem, but it was clean and whole, which was more than she usually wore. Her hands trembled as she tried to pin her dark hair into something resembling a bridal style. She had never been beautiful. Her face was too angular, her body too thin from years of meager rations. But today, with her cheeks flushed from nervousness and her brown eyes wide with apprehension, she looked almost hopeful. The chapel was nearly empty when she entered. A few orphanage staff members sat in the pews, along with 2 men she didn't recognize. And at the altar, waiting beside the elderly priest, stood her groom. Thomas was not what she expected. He was young, perhaps her age or slightly older, with kind eyes and a nervous smile that mirrored her own anxiety. He wore simple clothes, brown trousers, a white shirt, and a dark vest, but they were clean and well-maintained. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he stood with a straight posture that suggested quiet dignity despite his humble appearance. When their eyes met, he offered her a small, encouraging nod. That single gesture did more to calm her racing heart than any words could have. The ceremony was brief and formal. Elena heard herself reciting Vaz, felt Thomas's warm hand take hers, and registered the cool metal of a simple band sliding onto her finger. Within 20 minutes, she was a married woman, bound to this stranger for the rest of her life. "Hello, wife," Thomas said softly as they walked out of the chapel together. His voice was gentle, cultured in a way that surprised her for a stable hand. "I know this is strange for both of us, but I promise you, Elena, I will do everything in my power to make you happy." She looked up at him, searching his face for deception or cruelty, but found only sincerity. "Thank you," she whispered. "I will try to be a good wife to you." They walked toward the Westmore estate in silence, but it wasn't an uncomfortable quiet. And when Thomas offered her his arm to help her over a muddy patch in the road, Elena thought that perhaps, just perhaps, her life might not be as bleak as she had feared. The Westmore estate was grander than anything Elena had ever seen. Sprawling gardens surrounded a magnificent manor house with towering columns and countless windows that glittered in the afternoon sun. Thomas led her past the main house, however, toward the stables at the rear of the property. "It's not much," he said apologetically as they climbed the narrow stairs to a room above the horse stalls. "But it's clean and warm, and the horses are good company." The room was small, a single chamber with a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a washstand, and a small stove. But to Elena, who had spent her entire life sleeping in a dormitory with 20 other girls, it was a palace. The bed had actual blankets, the window had real glass, and there was a rug on the floor. "It's wonderful," she breathed, running her hand along the smooth wooden table. Thomas smiled, genuine relief flooding his features. "I'm glad you think so. I wasn't sure. I worried it would be too humble for a bride." "I'm an orphan who has spent my life scrubbing floors," Elena reminded him gently. "This is far more than I ever expected to have." He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "You deserve far more than this, Elena. I hope someday I can give it to you." The earnestness in his voice made her chest tighten with unexpected emotion. Before she could respond, Thomas cleared his throat and moved toward the door. "I should let you rest and settle in. I have work in the stables this afternoon. There's food in the cupboard. Help yourself to whatever you need. I'll return before dark." After he left, Elena sat on the bed, running her hands over the soft blanket. Her husband, the word still felt strange, was kind and considerate. He hadn't demanded anything of her, hadn't treated her with the contempt she'd feared. Instead, he'd shown her nothing but respect and gentle concern. She spent the afternoon organizing their small space, finding joy in arranging the few possessions Thomas owned. She discovered books, several of them, which was unusual for a stable hand. The titles were sophisticated: philosophy, history, poetry. She ran her fingers over the worn covers, wondering about this man she had married. Who was Thomas, really? And why did an educated man work in stables? The first weeks of marriage unfolded with careful politeness. Thomas worked long hours in the stables, and Elena took on work in the estate's kitchen to earn extra money. They ate simple dinners together each evening, gradually learning to share the same space. Elena discovered that Thomas was impossibly kind. He brought her wildflowers from the estate gardens. He insisted she take the larger portion of food at meals. He never raised his voice, never made demands, and always asked her opinion before making decisions that affected them both. What puzzled her most, however, was his education. In the evenings, she would catch him reading by candlelight, his lips moving slightly as he absorbed complex texts. His handwriting, when she glimpsed it, was elegant and precise. His manners were impeccable, his speech refined. "Where did you learn to read so well?" she asked one evening as they sat together after supper. Thomas looked up from his book, something guarded passing over his face. "My father insisted I receive an education," he said carefully. He believed every man should be able to read and write, regardless of his station. "Your father sounds like a wise man." He was. Thomas's expression softened with genuine affection. "He died 2 years ago. I miss him every day." Elena reached across the table and touched his hand gently. "I'm sorry for your loss. I never knew my parents, so I can't imagine how painful that must be." He turned his hand over, clasping hers with unexpected intensity. "Perhaps we can be family to each other now," he suggested quietly. "Neither of us need be alone anymore." The vulnerability in his voice touched something deep within her. "I would like that very much." As weeks turned to months, their polite coexistence transformed into genuine companionship. Elena found herself looking forward to evenings with Thomas, to their quiet conversations and shared laughter. He taught her to read better, patiently helping her sound out difficult words. She mended his clothes and made their small room feel like a home. But beneath the growing affection, Elena sensed secrets. Sometimes Thomas would disappear for hours with no explanation. Occasionally, well-dressed men would arrive asking for him by a different name. "Your Highness," she once heard whispered, though Thomas quickly ushered the visitor away. When she asked about these incidents, he would deflect with a smile and change the subject. Elena told herself that everyone had private matters. Whatever Thomas was hiding, she trusted it wasn't malicious. He had proven himself kind and honorable in every action. Surely, in time, he would trust her enough to share his secrets. Winter arrived with biting cold and snow that blanketed the Westmore estate. Elena and Thomas huddled close to their small stove, their breath visible in the frigid air of their room. Despite the hardship, Elena found herself happier than she had ever been. She had a home, a purpose, and a husband who treated her with genuine affection. One evening, as a snowstorm raged outside, Thomas seemed particularly troubled. He stared into the fire, his usual gentle expression clouded with worry. "What's wrong?" Elena asked, setting aside her mending to touch his shoulder. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally he spoke. "There are things about me you don't know, Elena. Things I should have told you before we married, but I was afraid." Her heart began to race. "What kind of things?" "My life is complicated in ways I never wanted to burden you with." He took her hands in his grip almost desperate. "But you deserve honesty. You deserve to know who you really married." Before he could continue, a sharp knock at the door interrupted them. Thomas went rigid, his expression transforming into something Elena had never seen, a mask of authority and command that seemed utterly at odds with the humble, stable hand she knew. "Don't answer it," he said quietly, but the door opened anyway. A tall man in expensive clothing entered without invitation, his bearing aristocratic and his expression severe. He looked at Thomas with a mixture of exasperation and respect. "Your Highness, you cannot continue to hide here. The king is demanding your immediate return to the palace. Your brother is causing chaos with the council, and your presence is desperately needed." Elena's mind went blank. "Your Highness? Palace? Brother?" The words made no sense strung together in reference to her husband, the stable hand. Thomas closed his eyes briefly, resignation washing over his features. When he opened them again, he looked at Elena with such raw emotion that her breath caught. "I was going to tell you tonight," he said softly. "I swear I was." "Tell me what?" Elena managed to whisper, though part of her already knew. "That I'm not really a stable hand. That my name isn't just Thomas." He stood, his posture transforming before her eyes into something regal and commanding. "I am Crown Prince Thomas Alexander of Valoria, first in line to the throne. And you, my dear wife, are the Crown Princess, whether either of us planned it or not." Elena couldn't breathe. The small room suddenly felt suffocating as she stared at the man she thought she knew, her husband, the gentle, stable hand, now revealed as a prince. The impossibility of it all crashed over her in waves. "You're a prince," she repeated flatly, the words sounding absurd even as she spoke them. "A crown prince?" "Yes." Thomas, or whoever he really was, dismissed the aristocratic man with a gesture. Once they were alone again, he knelt before her chair, looking up at her with pleading eyes. "Please let me explain. You lied to me." Her voice cracked. "You married me under false pretenses. I thought I was wedding a stable hand, someone like me, but instead, I married royalty without even knowing it." "I didn't lie about what matters," Thomas insisted. "Everything I've shown you about who I am as a person, my feelings, my character, my affection for you, all of that is real. The title, the position, those are just circumstances of birth." Elena laughed bitterly. "Just circumstances? Thomas, I'm an orphan. I can barely read. I don't know which fork to use at fancy dinners or how to curtsy, or any of the things a crown princess should know. Why would you do this to me? Why would you trap me in a life I'm completely unprepared for?" He flinched at her words but didn't look away. "Because I wanted a genuine marriage. I wanted a wife who would care about me, not my crown. My father, the late king, arranged marriages for my two older brothers. Both wives were noble women who married for power and status. The marriages are miserable, loveless political arrangements." He reached for her hands, but she pulled them away. My father died 2 years ago, and my oldest brother became king. But I couldn't bear the thought of another arranged marriage to someone who would see only my title. So, I made a bargain with him. What kind of bargain? I agreed to marry within 6 months, but I chose the manner of my own marriage. I asked Mother Superior at your orphanage to select a bride for me, telling her only that I was a stable hand in need of a wife. I wanted someone real, someone genuine, someone who might actually grow to care for me. Elena stood abruptly, pacing the small room.
So you used me.
You used my desperation and my poverty to get what you wanted, a guarantee that I would be grateful enough not to question anything, humble enough not to threaten you. No. Thomas rose as well, his face stricken. Elena, please, that's not what I intended at all. Yes, I wanted someone who wouldn't care about my status, but I never meant to deceive you forever. I planned to tell you the truth after we got to know each other, after you understood that I was simply a man who wanted to be loved for himself. These past months, getting to know you, falling in, he stopped abruptly. Falling in what? She whispered. In love with you, he finished quietly. I've fallen in love with my wife, and I've ruined everything by not being honest from the start. Elena spent a sleepless night grappling with the impossible truth. Her husband was a prince. She was now princess. Everything she thought she knew about her life had been revealed as an illusion. When dawn broke, Thomas approached her cautiously. We need to leave for the palace today, he said softly. My brother's summons isn't a request, it's a command. But I want you to know that you have choices, Elena. If you want to dissolve this marriage, I will ensure you're provided for. You'll have money, property, whatever you need to build a life of your own. Elena looked at him properly for the first time since the revelation. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed and worried. Despite her anger and confusion, her heart ached at the sight. Whatever else was true, she believed that he cared for her. And despite everything, she realized she cared for him too. I don't want to dissolve the marriage, she said finally. But I also don't want to be blindsided again. No more secrets, Thomas. If we're going to do this together, I need complete honesty. Relief flooded his face. No more secrets, he promised. I'll tell you everything about my family, the court, what to expect. We'll face it together. The journey to the capital city took 3 days by carriage. Thomas used the time to prepare her, explaining the intricacies of royal life. His brother, King James, was politically shrewd but personally cold. His younger brother, Prince Marcus, was charming but reckless. The court was full of ambitious nobles who would view Elena's low birth as either a weakness to exploit or a threat to their own positions. They'll underestimate you, Thomas said. Let them. Your genuine nature and good heart are worth more than all their political machinations. When the palace finally came into view, Elena's breath caught. It was magnificent, a sprawling structure of white stone with golden domes and towers that seemed to scrape the sky. Hundreds of windows glittered in the sunlight, and elaborate gardens stretched as far as she could see. This is where you grew up? She asked in wonder.
Yes.
It's beautiful, but often lonely. He squeezed her hand. It will be better with you here. As their carriage rolled through the palace gates, servants in livery rushed to attend them. Elena stepped out on trembling legs, acutely aware of her simple dress and worn shoes amid such splendor. But Thomas kept her hand firmly in his, presenting a united front. Welcome home, Your Highness, a butler intoned with a deep bow. His Majesty the King requests your presence in the throne room immediately. Thomas nodded. He turned to Elena, his expression serious. Are you ready for this? She thought about everything she'd survived, orphanhood, poverty, uncertainty. She had survived it all. She could survive this too. Ready as I'll ever be, she said, lifting her chin. Together, they walked into the palace, toward a future neither had truly planned but both were determined to face. The throne room was vast and intimidating, with soaring ceilings, marble columns, and elaborate frescoes depicting Valoria's glorious history. Courtiers in expensive silks and jewels lined both sides of a crimson carpet that led to an elevated dais where King James sat upon an ornate golden throne. Elena's first impression of Thomas's brother was one of cold calculation. King James was handsome in a severe way, with the same dark hair as Thomas, but harder eyes that assessed everything with distant judgment. He watched their approach with an expression that revealed nothing. "Brother," James said when they reached the dais. His tone was formal, devoid of warmth. "You finally grace us with your presence. And this must be your bride." Elena curtsied awkwardly, grateful for the hasty lessons Thomas had given her during the journey. "Your Majesty. An orphan, I'm told." James's gaze swept over her dismissively. "How unconventional." "She is my wife and your crown princess," Thomas said firmly. "She will be treated with the respect that position demands." A flicker of something surprise? Approval crossed the king's face. Bold words. "We shall see if she can live up to them." He gestured to a woman standing near the throne, an elegant lady in her 30s with sharp features and calculating eyes. "This is Lady Beatrice, my wife, your queen. She will instruct the new crown princess in her duties." Queen Beatrice's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How delightful. We have so much work to do." The words were pleasant, but Elena heard the condescension beneath them. She was a project to be fixed, an embarrassment to be concealed. Over the following days, Elena endured exhausting lessons in protocol, etiquette, dancing, and courtly behavior. Lady Beatrice was a harsh teacher who delighted in pointing out Elena's mistakes. "A crown princess does not slouch. That accent is unacceptable. You sound like a commoner. You eat like a field hand." Thomas tried to shield her from the worst of it, but he had his own duties. As crown prince, he was expected to attend council meetings, hear petitions, and participate in the complex political dance of court life. They barely saw each other except at formal dinners where they couldn't speak freely. One night, Elena found herself alone in their expansive chambers, rooms so large and ornate they made her uncomfortable. She missed their simple room above the stables, where life had been hard but honest. Here, everything felt artificial and hostile. A knock at the door revealed Prince Marcus, Thomas's younger brother. He was devastatingly handsome with an easy smile and mischievous eyes. "May I come in, sister?" Elena nodded, surprised by his informality. Unlike James and Beatrice, Marcus seemed genuinely friendly. "I wanted to welcome you properly," he said, settling into a chair uninvited. "And to say that I think Thomas made an excellent choice. The court is full of vipers. It's refreshing to meet someone real." "I'm not sure real is valued here," Elena said quietly. Marcus laughed. "Not in the slightest. But that's exactly why you might succeed where others fail. You have nothing to prove and no political ambitions. That makes you dangerous in the best way." 3 months into palace life, Elena still felt like an imposter. Despite endless lessons and her determination to succeed, she made mistakes, using the wrong title for a duke, forgetting the proper way to address foreign ambassadors, tripping during a ceremonial dance. Each error was met with whispers and barely concealed disdain from the court. But slowly, something shifted. Elena began to notice that beneath the elaborate protocol and political maneuvering, the palace had real problems that no one was addressing. Servants were overworked and underpaid. The kitchens wasted enormous amounts of food while beggars starved outside the palace gates. Children of lower-ranking staff had no access to education. "These are not appropriate concerns for a crown princess," Queen Beatrice said coldly when Elena raised these issues. "Your role is ceremonial. Leave practical matters to those qualified to handle them." But Elena couldn't ignore what she saw. Using her own experiences of poverty and hardship, she began making quiet changes. She arranged for excess kitchen food to be distributed to the poor. She convinced Thomas to allocate funds for a small school for servants' children. She began visiting hospitals and orphanages, not as a grand ceremonial gesture, but to genuinely understand their needs. The common people began to notice. Stories spread of the crown princess who had been an orphan herself, who understood their struggles, who actually cared about their welfare. Elena received letters thanking her for her work, flowers from grateful families, and most importantly, genuine smiles from people who had previously viewed royalty with suspicion or indifference. Thomas watched her transformation with pride. "You're becoming the princess this kingdom needs," he told her one evening as they finally had a quiet moment together. "Not the one the court expects, but something far more valuable." "I'm just doing what feels right," Elena said. "I spent my whole life powerless. Now that I have some power, I want to use it to help people like I used to be." He pulled her into his arms, kissing her forehead gently. "I don't deserve you. I brought you here under false pretenses, threw you into this impossible situation, and yet you've turned it into something beautiful." Elena looked up at him, seeing the genuine admiration and affection in his eyes. Over these months, despite the challenges, their relationship had deepened. The careful friendship they'd built above the stables had transformed into something profound. "We deserve each other," she corrected. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. Now we're building something together." That night, King James summoned Thomas for a private meeting. When he returned, Thomas looked troubled. "James is impressed with your popularity among the common people," he said carefully. "But he sees it as a political tool rather than genuine charity. He wants to use your orphan background in propaganda to make the monarchy seem more connected to the people." Elena considered this. "And what do you think?" "I think you should be authentic, not a political prop. But I also know that James's approval means you're safer here. The court can't dismiss you so easily if the king values you." A year after her arrival at the palace, Elena stood in the palace gardens reflecting on her incredible journey. She had transformed from an orphan scrubbing floors to crown princess, from a girl with no prospects to a woman wielding genuine influence. The path had been difficult, filled with challenges and moments of deep doubt, but she had persevered. She heard footsteps and turned to find Thomas approaching with an expression of barely contained excitement. "I have news," he said, taking her hands. "James is abdicating." Elena's eyes widened.
What?
"Why?" "He never wanted to be king. It was thrust upon him when our father died unexpectedly. He's been miserable, and his marriage to Beatrice has been a disaster. He's decided to step down and retire to the countryside with a substantial pension. Which means—" Thomas paused, his expression a mixture of anticipation and concern. "I will become king, and you will be queen." The magnitude of it struck Elena like a physical blow.
Queen.
Not just crown princess learning to navigate court life, but queen, with all the responsibility and power that entailed. "Thomas, I don't know if I'm ready for that. You're more ready than anyone I know." He cupped her face gently. "Elena, you've spent this past year proving that genuine compassion and understanding matter more than noble bloodlines. You've connected with people in ways no one else in this palace ever has. The kingdom needs a queen with a heart, not just royal pedigree. But the court will adjust. You have the people's love, which is more powerful than the court's approval." He smiled. "Besides, you have me. We'll face everything together, just as we always have." Tears filled Elena's eyes, not from fear, but from overwhelming emotion. A year ago, she had been forced into a marriage with a stranger, believing she was wedding a poor stable hand. That deception had hurt deeply. But through honesty, patience, and genuine effort from both of them, that forced marriage had become a true partnership built on love, respect, and shared purpose. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Thomas confessed. "Being king terrifies me. But I'm less scared because I'll have you beside me. We'll make mistakes, we already have. But we'll make them together, and we'll learn from them together." Elena thought about the orphan girl who had scrubbed floors, who had believed she would never matter to anyone. Then she thought about the woman she had become, still imperfect, still learning, but confident in her values and her love for the man beside her. Together, she agreed, leaning into his embrace. 6 months later, Elena stood in the palace cathedral wearing a crown that had been resized to fit her head, a symbolic gesture Thomas had insisted upon. It was no longer a crown made for someone else. It was hers, crafted to fit exactly who she was. As the archbishop pronounced them king and queen of Valoria, Elena looked out at the crowd and saw not just nobles, but common people who had been invited to witness the coronation, another change she and Thomas had implemented. The poor orphan had become queen, not by denying her past but by embracing it and using it to create a better future. And the crown prince, who had disguised himself as a stable hand, had found something more valuable than any kingdom, a genuine partnership with a woman who loved him not for his crown, but for his heart. As they left the cathedral hand in hand, Elena smiled. Their story had begun with deception and desperation, but it had transformed into something beautiful. Sometimes, she thought, the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings.